Hello all. Yesterday we gone through the concept of select statements, which are used to select data from database tables into program level. Okay. So we have select statements with the different syntax. So we use select single statement, that is to select only a single record, right? And here passing the primary key, all primary keys of the database table are mandatory. Okay. To select exact record. Okay. When you are using select single, you can use select single star to select all the fields of the table on one single record. And also the alternative is you can use selected fields for that particular record. Okay, you can select only selected fields for that particular record. For that you need to create a type structure with a list of fields, or you can also use a data dictionary structure, right? So for this also passing all the primary key values of the database table are mandatory. There are four primary keys, you have to pass all four primary key values as input in the where condition. Okay. So next, select star. Select star is to select one or more records from the database table. When we use star, we are saying that I need all the fields in each record. Okay, all the fields of the table. And we can also use select only required fields. So here we are saying that hey, I need one or more records with only selected fields. So it is always recommended to use only selected fields. Don't use select star until unless it is necessary. So how can you decide whether we need to go with the select star or only selected fields? Let's say there are 10 fields in the database table. There are 10 fields in the database table. You need only data of 3 fields. For example, employee ID, department and the phone number. You need only these 3 fields. Okay. Rest of the 7 fields data you don't need. You are not using it. Then what is the uh, preferable select statement? Do you need to use select star or select only required fields?
Select only required
Only
fields.
required fields, because you are selecting only 3 fields out of 10, right? Let's say in another scenario, you need to use almost 9 fields data, 9 fields data, right? So, right, you need to use all that fields in your logic. In this case, which one we need to use, select star or select required fields? Since we are
Select required
selecting
fields.
almost 90% of the data, 90% of the fields, right? Right? We have 10 fields in the table and we are almost selecting 9 fields, right? So in this case, you can go and use select star, right? Because you are not going to improve much performance here. For that, you need to create a type structure. You need to mention all the 90 fields. It is all necessary, right? So that doesn't require if you are selecting almost 90% of the table fields, right? So you have to decide whether you need to use select star or select only required fields by doing that analysis. How many fields you are using in the program? Okay. If you are using less than 80% of the fields or 70% of the fields, select only required fields. Don't go for select star. Also, where condition is very important, which will improve the performance of the program. Okay, you should always pass proper where condition so that it will select only required data. It will limit the data size which is transferring from database to application. Okay, clear? Now here we are writing select queries, right? So what do we call this? Select statements, all these database queries. What do we call this in general? You might have already read this in your graduation or BTech. What do we call these select statements and some database statements? SQL, right? SQL queries, SQL statements, right? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So what kind of select statements we write in ABAP? We write open SQL statements. We write open SQL statements, which supports any database, database independent, okay. These are not depends on the database, it will work on any database. What kind of SQL statements we write in ABAP? Open
Open
SQL
SQL.
statements. What are the native SQL statements? Native SQL statements are specific to any specific database like Oracle, right? Those native SQL statements, if you write native SQL statements on Oracle, so those statements will work only for the Oracle database. If you write native SQL statements for Microsoft SQL Server database, they will work only on the SQL, Microsoft SQL. If you write native SQL statements for HANA database, those native SQL statements will work only on HANA database. But SAP always recommends to use what kind of statements? Open SQL
But
statements, which supports any database, because in future there might be changes to the database. Currently they are using HANA, right? There might be some other advanced database which will be introduced in coming years, right? Then we may adopt that database by removing the HANA database. At that time, whatever the programs you implemented, they should work on the new database, right? Yes or no? They should be able to select data from the database tables, right? If you change the database, if you change the backend database, if you write native SQL statements, what will happen? Those native SQL statements are not going to work on the new database. Again, you need to change all your programs which should support the new database. Okay, so it's additional overhead, right? So that is why SAP always recommends to use open SQL statements which will work on any database. Okay, which will work on any database. So you don't need to change the programs whenever there is a change in the database. Okay, so don't write native SQL statements in ABAP. Still native SQL statements will work. Not saying native SQL statements are not going to work in ABAP. They'll work, but there is a dependency, right? So whenever in future, if there is a scope of changing the database, right, these native SQL statements are not going to support. Okay, clear? But in very rare cases, that too in ECC, when we were in ECC, in very rare cases we implemented native SQL statements because of the performance issues. Okay, because of the performance issues when we need to select data by using some comparison operators, right? So we implemented native SQL statements. Again, when we have implemented the HANA database, those become obsolete, means they're not going to work. We have to replace those statements with the OpenSQL statements. So when you are implementing the OpenSQL statements, you don't need to worry about the backend database. Backend database can be anything. Okay, you need to write select statements only in OpenSQL so that they'll automatically convert the OpenSQL statements into native SQL statements. System will take care of it. You write select queries or any database statements in OpenSQL, the ABAP system will take care of converting it to native SQL as per the backend database configuration. You don't need to worry about it. Okay? Is everyone clear? Is everyone clear? So what type of SQL we need to write in ABAP?
Open SQL.
Open SQL statements which should support any database. Database independent statements. Still we are using only HANA database, right? Still we need to write open SQL statements which should support any database, because in future there might be another advanced database which will provide better performance than HANA. Then there is no choice that we have to adopt it, right? Now let's create a simple program to select data from the database tables and display the output. The transaction code is SC38. Before going to program, we'll check the database tables for available data. Okay. First, we'll check the data, like what are the tables we need to use in our program. Let's use our employee table example. ZDemo employee. Looks like this table is not available. Let's create a table. Again, we'll go back to the basics, creating a database table. Employee master data. What is the delivery class? What type of table we are creating? Is it a configuration table or application table? Application table is
Application.
for master data or transactional data, business data, right? Customizing, all these are for system configurations. Application table A, delivery and maintenance allowed.
X.
So delivery and maintenance allowed. Now go to the fields. What is mandatory? A primary key is mandatory, right? A primary key
Yes.
is mandatory for every table. Here I'll introduce one new topic here. Client independent and client dependent. Client independent and client dependent. There are two types of data. So in SAP system in 2021, when you are login, what did you observe in the login screen? Client number, right? There is a client number 800. What is that client number? It is a logical partition. It is a logical partition of the SAP system. Let's say this is the SAP server. This is the SAP server 2021. So we can create logical partition for this server using client. Using client. Let's assume this is client number 100. This is client number 101. This is client number, let's assume 800. We have clients starting from 1 to 999. Okay. So the system can be partitioned using client number. Now, what is the use of it? If you create data in one client, that data cannot be accessible in other client. The database table is same, system is same, database is same, application program is same. But when you log in into one specific client and when you create data in the database tables from that client, if you log in into a different client of the same system into the same database table, you cannot see the data which you created in the client number 100 because that data is client dependent. That is only available for client number 100. If you log into the client number 101 and create some records in the database table, those records will be only available for 101. Those cannot be accessible for client number 100 or client number 800. Similarly, if you log in client number 800, right, and create some entries in the database tables, those entries cannot be accessible in client number 100 and client number 101. When this will happen? When you create a client dependent data in the database tables. Client dependent data, client independent data. So how can you differentiate when you are creating a database table? How can you make it as a client independent data, client dependent data? Client dependent data means whatever the data you created in one client, that is not visible to the other clients. Client independent data means whatever the data you created in one client, that is available throughout the system in any client. You can access the data in any client. Okay. What is database client independent? What is client independent data?
Can be accessed by other clients on.
Okay, you can access the same data records from any client because that is a client dependent data. So how can you make it as a client dependent data or client independent data? We have a special field called MANDT. MANDT. MANDT nothing but client number. It is the technical field name of client number. We use client number field in the database table to make it independent or dependent. To make it dependent, to make it client dependent, so that whatever the data created in this client cannot be accessible for other clients. When you add MANDT field as a first field of your database table, and it should be a primary key. Okay, data element is also same, MANDT client number. This is client number. If you create a table with client number as the first field, what type of data you are creating in this table? Client dependent
Client
data.
dependent
Whatever the data you create in the system cannot be accessible in other
other
clients.
client.
Okay, if you don't use MANDT, that is client
Client
independent data.
independent
Data can
data.
be accessible in any client. If you
Client.
create a database table, this table can be accessible in any client. You can open this table in any client. But what is the difference?
Data,
When you try to
data
access
con.
the data records of the table, then it will make the difference. Okay, you can
Okay.
access the records only which are created in the same client. Okay, if you log in into the different client, you cannot see those records which are created in the different client. Okay, is everyone clear? Now the regular
Sir, is
fields.
it mandatory?
Yeah, that's
Is it
what.
mandatory to do take the as it is as first field
Yes,
as
it is mandatory. You
mandatory?
should take MANDT as a first field, and it should be a primary key. And it's not part of your business primary keys. Okay? When you are creating
Okay.
employee master data table, what should be the primary key? Employee ID, at least. Employee ID is the primary key, right?
Okay.
And don't consider it as a primary key of your database table. Just consider it as a
Okay.
technical field name. Okay? Don't consider it as a
Okay.
primary key of your table. Okay? It won't create data, depends on the client number, your business data. Okay?
Oh, okay.
It's just a technical field name, and if you want to create client dependent data, please make it as the first field. Next, EMP ID. I'm making it as a primary key. Not sure whether our data elements are available or not. Looks like it is not available. Data element is not available. Creating the data element. I'm providing the local object for now as a local package. Create the data element. Employee ID. Maintain the field labels. And next, what is the next step? Provide the data element. You can use same name as sorry, domain, not data element. You can use same name as for the domain also. Domain is not available. Create the domain. What is domain? Domain is the technical
Technical
attribute of the
attribute.
table field. Okay. So it contains case sensitive option and value ranges, fixed values,
Intervals.
and
Intervals option.
value table.
Intervals.
Yes. So you can use case sensitive option if you want, but for this I don't want a case sensitive option. Activate the domain, go back, activate the data element. Your data element is active. Now create one more field, employee name. Usually we don't take name as a primary key because name is common, right? Multiple employees might have same name, right? Create data element for name. Activate the data element. Sorry, first we need to provide the domain. Next we need to provide the domain. Here I am not using domain. I'll go with built-in type because I don't want any case sensitive option and I don't want any value ranges and fixed values, intervals. I don't want any of those options. For to save some time now, I'll just use built-in types. So what can you understand here? Domain is not mandatory to create a data element. Okay. Can we create a table field without data element? Can we create a table field without using data elements?
No, domain is possible. Without data element, we can't.
We can create. We can use built-in types, right? Go for built-in types. Enter char 10. Enter your field name here, right? You can create without data element. Data element is not mandatory to create a database table, but it is
Okay.
recommended to use a data element because to maintain consistency,
Development,
right? Consistency and reusability.
reasonability.
Phone is also not available. Let me create phone number. Here also I'm not using any domain. I'll just use built-in types. You know, right, how to create domain. For you when you are practicing, create domain for every table field and for every data element. Num.c10, I'll take num.c10 for phone number. Activate the data element. Go back. City. Do you need to create a custom data element for city? We have a standard data element, right? How can you find standard data elements? Go to any standard database table. For example, KNA1. What is KNA1 table? It is for customer master data.
Customer
It is
master
for
data.
customer master data. City is there, right? So we have existing data element. What is the technical field name of city? ORT01. ORT01 is the technical field name of the city, but we are taking different field name here. Use the existing data element. Use the existing data element ORT01 underscore GP. You don't need to create a new data element again. When you have existing data elements, existing standard data elements. Okay. What else we need? What else we need in the, okay, let's take date of join. DOJ, ZDemo, DOJ. Double click to create date of join field. I'll create a domain for this. I'll use same name. What is the data type? We need to take,
Date type.
what is it? Here we have different dates.
DATS.
DATS. DATS. This is the internal date format. YYYYYMMDD. Year, month and
DT.
date. You don't need to provide the length. It will automatically take it. Activate the domain. Go back. Provide the label. Now activate the data element. So earlier you were able to see a lot of objects here, right? When you are trying to activate,
Yes, sir.
because many other users created a lot of objects and they did not activate them. So all of us are using best as user ID. Everyone is using best as user ID. So there are a lot of inactive objects on best user ID. Now they refresh the system, right? So they have deleted everything. Now you can see only limited objects here. So when you are working in the project, your visibility is like this. Only you can see one or two objects in this activation list. Even sometimes you can see only that object, that specific object. Okay. Now go back. You have created some records. Next, what is the next step after creating the table? Maintain the, sorry, after
Technical
maintain the
settings.
fields, maintain the technical settings. Provide the data class, what type of table it is? Master data table. So
Master
it
data.
will, we are providing physical storage location of this data as APPL0, so that the master data will store in that physical storage location. I'm providing size category. It is approximate number of records which we are going to store in the table. Again, if the limit is exceeds after 2800 records, is it going to allow to create new records?
Yes.
Yes, it will allow. Okay, it won't stop, but it will add one more size category, another
Size category.
2800 records again whenever required. Okay, but sometimes when you are inserting huge records, right, it may impact the performance when you don't use a proper size category, because every time it needs to allocate the size category when the program is executing. Save the program, save the table, and activate the database table. I think you have to provide enhancement category, otherwise we'll see this warning. You can ignore this warning if you want. No, so your database table is active. If you don't want to see the warning, so we provide enhancement category.
Friends
Can we
category.
enhance this table in future or not? Right? Yeah, at present not classified. So we can enhance, and providing this option can enhance. Because why we select this option? Because when we create some application, when we create some backend database tables, right? And the application is live and running, for other development, for some other development, right, some other developer may change the database table, right, existing database table, then it will impact the existing applications, existing live applications, right. So that's why we specify these options, whether this can be changed in future or not. Okay, to make sure others are not disturbing the database table for different functionalities, or if they have to do it, they'll make sure it is not impacting the other applications. Now, what is the next step? To maintain the data in master data tables, we create a
Utilities.
table maintenance
Table.
generator, TMG. Authorization group, I'll use no authorization, NC, this one without authorization group. And what about the function group?
Function group.
For now, use
Same
table
as
name as the function group. It will create it. Okay, it will create a new function group, but we are just assigning table name as the function group, but both are different objects. It will create a new function group with this name. Okay, here we have one step and two step. What is one step? It contains only one overview screen. In that overview screen, we can add the records or we can change the records.
change
If
the
you,
record.
if you select two step, it contains two screens, one overview screen and one single screen. Changes you can do in overview screen, and creating new records, it will open single screen in a new screen. Okay. So you can enter the screen number, or you can find the screen number options. You can use the find screen number options. It will propose next available screen number for this function group. Okay. Since we did not create any screens yet in this new function group, it will propose screen number. The screen number 1 it is proposing. Okay. Now, what is this option? Standard recording routine and no user recording routine. If you use standard recording routine, what will happen? It will ask for a request to transport this
transport
data from development system to test system and then to
testing
production system.
production system.
Okay. So it is mandatory that it will ask a transport request. So your data records will be added to the transport request. If we select no or user recording routine, it won't create any
Creating
transport
any
request. You can
transport request.
maintain the data in individually in development system, test system and production system. You don't need to create a transport. Okay.
Transport request.
Create the maintenance screen, save it. It's just showing a warning that we have selected enhancement category as can be enhanced deep, right? So it is saying that this table can be extensible without any limits. You can add any fields, so that make sure whenever there is a changes in the table, you should regenerate the table maintenance generator also. If you add a new field or if you delete a field, if you change the data type of the field, if you change the length of the field, what is mandatory? You have to regenerate the corresponding
Regenerate
table
the
maintenance screen as well. Okay. Save the maintenance screen, go back, maintain the entries where we can maintain SM30. We can also
30.
create a direct transaction code using which transaction code? SC93. There we can create a custom transaction code. What type of transaction code we create for table maintenance generator screens? Parameter
SM30.
transaction code. Parameter transaction code we create. But for now, we are using SM30 screen to maintain the data. Edit, create new entries, 100, name of 100, some phone number. Okay, just copy this, Control Y, Control C, Control V. I'll just copy. It is not copying. Okay, 102, name of 102, some records. It is stuck. The server is slow. So we can also adjust this field labels, right? How can you adjust these field labels? How can you change the field headings? In table maintenance generator option, we have a modification overview, right? So if you go to that modification overview option, You can